Opposed? So that motion carries. Item 2 is to consider approval or denial of various license applications. We have a couple recommended for denial this evening. The first one is Christopher McGurk. And anyone that's proposed for denial has the right to address the committee about their record if they so choose. So is Christopher McGurk in the audience with us this evening to address the committee? Okay, we'll let the record show he has not appeared. Kelly Oxendine? Kelly Oxendine? Also not present. We have a recommended denial for Eric Hendrickson. Eric Hendrickson? Not in attendance. And Sarah Zaromsky? Sarah Zaromsky? Let the record note she has not attended either. Last denial recommendation is for Brian Klippel. Oh, come on up, Brian, if you want to state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. My name is Brian Klippel. I live at 907 South 5th Avenue in Wausau, Wisconsin.
Okay. And I noticed that you had submitted some documents for review for evidence of rehabilitation after the recommendation?
That is correct.
Okay. Chief, have you had a chance to review those documents that have come in?
Yes, I have.
Does that alter your recommendation at all?
No.
Okay. Committee members, questions at all? So is there anything factually inaccurate in your record, Mr. Klippel?
No, but I have a statement if I might be able to read it.
Sure, yeah.
I'd like to thank the Wausau Public Health and Safety Committee for allowing me the opportunity to speak at this session. On Friday, May 3rd, 2024, I received a letter in the mail from the Deputy City Clerk informing me that an application I had submitted for a public transport driver's license had been recommended for denial by Police Chief Matt Barnes due to 2 ongoing court cases I currently have. However, I didn't actually apply for a public transport driver's license. Several weeks ago, I paid a fee of $110 to renew my bartending license. After calling and speaking with the Deputy City Clerk, Cody Hart, and asking him if there was a clerical mistake made, he informed me there was. However, it wouldn't matter what license it was, I would still need to address this committee. I'm here to humbly request you grant renewal of my bartending license. Although I have 2 open cases, I am currently in the process of fighting the charges that have been brought against me by the state and hope to maintain the presumption of innocence as both cases are currently ongoing. I've been bartending in Wausau for around 14 years and have never had any incidents at any of the establishments I've been employed at, which would suggest to the committee I am unable to perform my duties as a safe and responsible bartender. I am currently working at M&R Station, which has a no drinking on the job policy, which I adhere to without issue, which the owner, Rick Gordon, can attest to. I am currently sober and proud of my sobriety. As part of my bond, in my case, I must report to ADDIC for random breathalyzers, drug screens, and ETG urinalysis, all of which I have passed without issue. Also, I have already had an AODA evaluation and am currently attending counseling sessions at North Central Healthcare, which I would have to attend if I am found guilty of third offense OWI, even prior to a potential conviction on my own accord. I fully intend on maintaining my sobriety even after my cases are closed. I request you allow me to renew my bartending license so I may maintain my full-time employment at M&R Station. This is my only source of income, and given the circumstances and short amount of time before my current license expires, I fear my prospects and ability to find work doing something fulfilling are bleak. I enjoy my job, I enjoy the work I do, the man I work for, the establishment I work at, and the patrons who frequent my establishment. As I said before, I have never had any issues in my nearly 14 years of bartending which would suggest I am incapable of performing my job safely. At many of the establishments I have worked at, if ever there was an issue to arise, I have always called the police to work diligently with the responding officers in order to resolve whatever issue may be. I have never been cited for working without a permit, fined for failing to meet lawful requirements of bartending, put patrons in danger, or put establishments in jeopardy of being cited, fined, or docked points. I request the committee allow me to renew my license as I currently maintain the presumption of innocence in my ongoing court cases, and if at any point in time I am found guilty of the charges against me, decide at that point in time whether or not I am fit to maintain a bartending license. Thank you.
Thank you for that. With regard to the renewal status of the license, has that third OWI offense occurred between last license year and this renewal?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, and if that third, my understanding was if that third conviction was upheld, that is a felony conviction, is it correct?
It is misdemeanor.
Oh, okay. Because I thought you would be unable to hold the license if you had three. I thought that was part of our criteria.
It's criteria that has been utilized.
Right.
Although there's some flexibility with that, it's not a mandatory
Okay,
via statute.
okay. Go ahead, Tegan.
So this isn't on point with the DUI, but I would like to point out that the offense under 940.2351, so the strangulation and suffocation, and then the 940.191, the battery offenses, those are exempt offenses. And so what that means is that this body is not required to consider evidence of rehabilitation for that offense,
Okay. All right,
those offenses.
and it looks like based upon the evidence received, then the chief's recommendation for denial remains denial.
Yep.
Yeah.
My struggle with this one, there are great character references that wrote letters on his behalf. He's standing here in front of us. But what we saw evidence of is participation in rehabilitation as opposed to the completion of those projects, which would render one potentially rehabilitated. And the fact that these are still open cases, we're allowed to consider open cases and arrests that haven't been adjudicated. And, you know, when I look at the criteria that I established, trying to be fair with everyone, that wasn't enough information to change my recommendation.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, so if you're curious, the statute about arrest records is 111.32.
Thank you.
Is what's that?
111.32, Wisconsin statutes.
Okay.
Okay, does anyone, committee members have questions at all? Okay. Thank you for coming in with that statement. Absent a request from the committee to consider any of the licenses recommended for denial separately, you can accept or deny them as a batch, is what we typically do. We typically will take a motion to accept or deny licenses as recommended by staff. If someone wishes to put forward that recommendation, or that motion, rather, sorry. Or do we want to consider any of this separately?
We would be appropriate to put Mr. Kipple separate.
Okay. So then we'll take Brian Klippel separately after the group motion. So do we have a motion then to accept or deny licenses as recommended by staff with the exception of Brian Klippel? Motion from McElhaney, is there a second? Second from Lukens. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries. So then we'll consider Brian Klippel. You have the record and the documentation in your packets that were received from the clerk's office. And so all motions are in the affirmative. If you wish to grant the license against the offered order of the staff, you would vote in favor. If you wish to uphold the denial, you would then vote no. Go ahead, Sarah.
So would we review renewals in a similar way as we would like approvals or denials? And then is there a way that this would come back after the cases are resolved?
If the cases are cleared, they can reapply. So anybody that's denied for a license at this point, if the record is changed or court cases have resolved favorably, they reapply. Anytime during the year. It doesn't have to be with the July 1st renewals. Go ahead, Lou.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, I struggle with this one because I've been down this path before in my life, and you know, I struggle with it because I know that being a bartender and having an alcohol addiction problem, you know, I know that, you know, if you play in the snake pit long enough, you're going to get bit, you know, and I also struggle with this because of the unresolved third WOI, you know. I think with you know, why I wanted to put this separately, because I wanted to make those points, you know, of interest. And for that, at this time, not, when there's a pending OW, I can't justify, I'd have to stand with the chief on this one. And
Yeah, I
can't
think that's my struggle as well, is the
justify-
recent nature. You know, when we look at the totality of the record, one thing that we've discussed with other applicants is sometimes the cure for this stuff is time. And completing the rehabilitation, letting the court cases resolve, if they resolve favorably, and then the recommended treatment program is completed and some time passes, so these things are not so fresh on the record. That's typically helpful, but these are recent, so I struggle with that as well. So to clear this one and decide either way, we'll need to take a motion, and then we'll need to take a vote on it. So is there a motion to approve the license, operator license for Brian Klippel? Motion by Watson, is there a second? Second by McElhaney. Further discussion or questions? So members in favor of granting the license signify by saying aye. Okay, members opposed, vote no.
No.
No. So let the record show that has failed 1-4. So the license right now, the committee recommendation is to deny the license. You have the right to address the full city council at its first meeting in June, which is the second Tuesday of June, to make an appeal of the committee's decision if you wish.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so that takes care of our licensing item in total. Item number 3 is discussion and possible action on amending Wausau Municipal Code, Section 5.52.120 and 5.52.090 with the motion to accept or deny. They all go through together. So yes, we got them all with one vote. So item 3 is pawnbrokers, secondhand dealer, article dealers, and secondhand jewelry dealers to include the remainder of the acceptable forms of ID from the Wisconsin statute 134.71, paragraph 8. And so you have in your packets an amendment recommended by the legal department to amend our pawnbrokers ordinance to accept alternative forms of identification. This is really a cleanup to this to make sure that we're in compliance with state statute. I think this came to light when it was identified that the form of identification that the customer had was not listed as one that was acceptable in our ordinance, but should be. Does anyone have any questions on this at all? If not, is there a motion to approve that change? Motion from Watson, is there a second? Second by Lukens. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries. Item number 4 is a presentation on the current animal control program and the 2025 proposed model. You'll recall maybe a few months ago, this started in the Finance Committee. With the merger of Rothschild PD and Everest Metro, they have pulled out of our animal control joint program. At that point, the Finance Committee directed Chief Barnes to go back and take a holistic analysis of the animal control program and the services provided there and how they're provided to determine, before we infused any more money into the program to fill that void, if there were efficiencies we could gain to provide that service for essentially the same money that we're already budgeting without having to use municipal dollars to fill that income void from that shared contract. So they've spent the last few months doing some analysis as far as how they are providing that service today, and if they have some ideas for how we could be perhaps more efficient in providing that service and utilizing those same funds without infusing new money into the program. So we've got that presentation. What we'll do is we've got a couple of folks, I believe, that would like to make public comment. We'll take that comment after the presentation. So we want to get all the information out first. And we'll have some committee discussion. We'll take public comment, and then the committee can make a recommendation if it so chooses. So we'll welcome up the clerk. She's been working on this along with Nate Seiler, and they have a PowerPoint. Yep, that's up, so,
And then it's up for the.
oh,
for the
perfect.
committee that wants.
Thank you. And Tegan, you've also worked on this with them, right? I think you guys
I
have
have.
taken
They've
a team
asked-
approach.
Yeah, so it's a team approach, but I don't really have, I'm not in the PowerPoint. I'm here to answer questions.
Okay.
They've, Nate and Caitlin did a.
Perfect. We will hold you on standby mode in case we have legal questions, and we'll let Nate and Caitlin give their report.
A different version
Of what? The clicker? No, unfortunately. The clicker is not working at the moment.
I can click.
You got it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Perfect.
On both of them. You want this first?
Oh, yeah, area access would appreciate that. Thank you all for allowing us to present to you. Like Lisa said, we were tasked with evaluating our current program and thinking about different ways that we can potentially make the program more efficient, knowing that we are losing this funding. And so we're going to go over the brief history of the program and then present our recommendation for a model to implement in 2025.
Again, thanks for having me. Nate Seiler, Captain for the Administrative Bureau of the Police Department. So looking back in the history of this, in 2013 is when the humane officer position was created through the council. The primary goals and basis for that position and the funding for it, you'll see there, was really to grow and surge compliance with pet licensing and vaccination laws in the city towards that goal of responsible pet ownership here in our community. Also, to divert a bulk of those animal control or animal-related calls for service and code enforcement away from our patrol officer and the overall workload there, to free them up to do other things. So applying that added position and full-time attention to licensing enforcement, ultimately the goal was that the added revenue from that would amount to covering the cost of that new position. Part of funding that initial position was through the contract with Everest Metro, as you heard, provide services to their municipalities, which include Schofield, Town, and Village of Weston. So the original framework in 2013, as it was set up, that enforcement revenue with licensing plus that contract revenue should amount to covering the cost. The structure was a single full-time employee assigned to do the work as a humane officer with some summer community service officer budget to help with that. The schedule is set up Monday through Friday, 8-hour shift for the one employee, daytime schedule. The hours are generally 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. With that, there's also acquisition of a new vehicle for this position, equipped with that mobile data terminal to be able to do citations and things of that nature out in the community patrol capacity. That vehicle is currently, it's a leased vehicle, so it's a lease program, so that the budget also pays for the lease, obviously, and the fuel associated with that. Again, tasked with growing that compliance with animal licensing and going through the city clerk's office to act on license status information that they have from the prior year. With that, in order to take on that bulk of animal control, day-to-day calls for service, just being that primary first responder for welfare and nuisance complaints, which can come in a variety of forms, fashion, whether it's phone call to dispatch or an officer asking for assistance, also strays and bite calls. And then, of course, we had established like an annual pause and protect program in order to try to, as another way to educate and boost licensing and vaccination in the city and with Weston and Schofield. So that's why we're here today. Just to recap, and that contract started around 2014, amounts to that $16,860 a year, and that was rejected as of 2024. So that's no longer existing for the 2024 calendar year. That represents about 18% of the position cost. And then in the surface review is just looking at animal licensing in the city overall and looking at our population growth over the last 10 years and what does licensing compliance look like compared to that, and it still seems a little low. So without the entire job description up here, just most of this seems common sense, but the current just description summary would be to pick up the stray animals, impound or return to owner as able, responding to investigating the day-to-day bite complaints. Well, we don't get that many of them, but rabies quarantine process that goes with that, notification of dangerous animal ordinance if we declare something dangerous, responding to those general animal complaints. The at-large dog, animal welfare checks from people in the community are concerned about, their neighbor's animal and what that looks like. Nuisance complaints could be having too many animals in the house, things like that. And also enforcing those animal-related ordinances, as you see there, and impounding animals as needed to our partner at the Humane Society. And then along with being that initial investigator for animal cruelty type complaints. So why Humane Officer? So this title as Humane Officer, as was appointed at that point in time, it's a statutory position. It's defined by Wisconsin statute and created by statute. And really the history and purpose behind that is to allow a county, village, city, municipality to appoint a Humane Officer as a separate law enforcement entity. So places that don't have a sponsoring law enforcement jurisdiction, don't have the coverage, they don't have an agency that's enforcing those state laws around rabies vaccination laws, things like that. So it was allowed or put there so that counties can run a civilian program without law enforcement having to run it, and giving those positions authority to carry out those laws, enforce those laws. Naturally, they can take custody of animals, do all those things that our officers can do. They can submit reports, investigations, prosecutions. It also gives some additional authority for being able to apply for search warrants, inspection warrants, things of that nature, although they would still need a law enforcement officer to execute that. So that does exist in the state of Wisconsin. It is utilized that way, like Bean County, Portage County are examples of county-run programs. They're not umbrellaed under a law enforcement agency. It allows those, county-wide enforcement in townships and so forth of those state laws. So our understanding the context of why this route went this way in 2013 was really that providing services outside our city, outside our jurisdiction. So similar how we deputize our drug task force officers so that they're covered to be able to provide services outside the city limits. That is a basis for why this position was selected and named this, or this statute was used because of the idea we're putting a city employee out into Weston, actually 3 different municipalities, making sure that we're covered under the law and all the services being provided out there by an employee of the city. So that's where that comes into play. The program budget as set for going back to last year, 2023, you'll see it there for the wages and costs of the position, Humane Society and other contracts. So that's the held for cause contract, the non-dog stray contract that we pay on every year with them. And then additionally, there's the fleet and IT equipment that were added with the position. So looking at the last 10 years or so of what licensing enforcement looks like. So we try to capture, as we're going through the data information in our records management system on the police side of the house, pre-program, so 2011, 2012, looking back at citations then. So animal-related citations, so everything under Wausau Municipal Code, Chapter 808. So that could be the no license, that could be the dog at large, no vaccination, anything that falls under there. So pre-program, department-wide, we averaged 70 citations per year over those 2 years as kind of a baseline. So then we looked at the last 4 years, so 2023 backward to 2020. Department-wide, we're averaging 125 citations per year in this category across all of those animal-related violations. So you kind of see the breakdown of the numbers there, including how many of those were the no license citations, which has an $187 fine, and a breakdown by total by our agency, and then the ones issued by the humane officer.
I have just a quick question on
Yeah.
that. So when the program was built in 2013, I was here and was part of that. And Becky was also as part of a citizen member of a task force. So at that point, when that program was created, licensing compliance in the city was at about 10%. We believed about 10% of the animals that existed here were licensed. I think the problem with having a gap, though, in our data is what happened between 2013 and 2020. Because I think COVID upset this entire business, at least for the COVID year, because obviously that enforcement required some mode of contact with people. But I was under the impression, based on reports that we were getting in this committee, that during those years, licensing compliance jumped up to something like 60%, and then now has slid back in the last 4 years because we've not recovered fully from we had almost a total reduction during the COVID year, and, it's been slow ever since. But there was a right out of the gate success with that enforcement when it first began, because we were getting reports from the vet clinics that gave rabies vaccines, and then that rabies vaccine list was compared with the licenses that we knew of that didn't renew, and then for those that didn't, that were new pets, then the goal of the program was to send the employee out to make contact with those folks, find out if they had a pet, issue some type of identification that they need to get the license, and then when they don't, there was a fine. Right, so.
Yeah, I have that context.
Okay.
Just year to year, so I can provide some of that. So
Okay.
you're correct. In 2012, in this lane of Chapter 8 citations, 2012 Wausau PD was at 64. 2011 was 75, hence the 70 across those 2 years. That first year, 2013, when there was, I wasn't involved with the program back then, but our total citations across Wausau PD went up to 251 that year in 2013. So
Okay.
you're right. 2014 went to 191, 2015, 120, 2016, 97, 2017, 76, 2018, 89, 2019, 79. 2020, there was a little bump, went up to 140 with COVID.
Okay.
There's probably a couple reasons for that. 2021 went up to 184. Yes, this is all animal citations that fall under that.
So not just failure to license even?
Not just failure license, that's everything together.
See, I guess that's the statistic that I wanted us to talk about a little bit, because what we saw was some early success, and the citation revenue really is what happens when you don't get compliance by other means. So we don't know really how many people self-correct with the warning, but we do see a steady, I really thought those numbers would have held higher for longer. I guess I'm surprised by the amount of step down even prior to COVID. Because if we were out there doing that same effort, would we not have had similar results?
And we'll get to more of the licensing numbers in a minute.
Okay.
But you're right, in 2012, we had about a 12% compliance rate based off of estimates from outside agencies on the amount of dogs and cats we'd have based on the number of households in the city. So it's like a rough estimate. But then it looks like our peak in 2021 was at like 32%, and now we're back down to like 31%.
Okay.
In 2021, there's some context around
Increased enforcement.
And also what we could issue citation for. We talked about, hey, there's a non-renewal. Can we just send them a citation with nothing else? And we were doing that, and we were identified with the city attorney's office, like, we need a little more evidence. We got to establish some cause and get eyes on, and we can't just issue a citation based off of the record. So,
Sure.
So that 2021, we issued a lot of them under that misconception or misunderstanding, I guess. And then 2022 went back down to 67 total.
Okay.
In 2022, I did grab, just for recent, like 34 of those in 2022 were for no license.
Okay.
So that's where we're at.
That's helpful context. Thank you for that.
Sure. So a little bit kind of next slide. To recap on that, so we look at, what was the goal here and the growth in order to, fund the cost of this position. So you see kind of where we started, and the realized gain in citations per year right now, average is 55 citations, is what we've gained over that time. So that's based off 125 citation average per year over the last 4 years. If you take that time, the max rate, the 187 is for the no license. Even if they're all for that and everyone paid them, our gain on that per year is $10,000. The median rate for 155 is like for a no vaccine. There's a 124 for dog at large. If you take the median rate, it's our gain in growth and citation revenue since 2013 is $8,500 a year.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's where we're at.
Okay.
Okay. So it's helpful when we talk about pet licensing to look at our cycle that we follow. So in November, we send out our annual renewal notice letters to all of the licensed pets in the city. And then in December, all annual dog, cat, and pet fancier licenses expire at the end of the year. By state law, we are not allowed to charge them a late fee until March 31st. So we send out a reminder letter in February. This year it was a citation letter, which was not appreciated. But we sent that out to all those pets that were licensed the previous year and then that had not renewed yet at that point. Also noting that at the end of June is when our annual chicken keeping permits expire. So there's that. And then if anyone has a puppy or kitten that they license them in the last half of the year, they get a license at half the rate. But you can see that those months, April through August, are highlighted in red. And that's really when Nate mentioned that proactive enforcement, where we have to send a physical person out to the premise, out to their house, to verify that the pet actually lives there, because pets can pass away or move out of the city from time to time. That's why they don't relicense their pets. But we have to do that before we issue citations. Okay. So when we review the program from the licensing standpoint, it is typical to have a backlog of license inspections. We have our pet fancier license, our beekeeping license, and chicken keeping license, that before they can be issued, they have to have an inspection of the premise to ensure that they can provide proper care to the animals prior to that issued license. Also, there is regularly that annual delay in warnings and enforcement, because it is not uncommon to have 400 to 600 pets when we get to that March 31st deadline that have not renewed from the previous year. So that is just a large volume of pets to renew or to go and check on in that those summer month timeline. And also that September and October were highlighted in yellow because people really also don't appreciate when we try to enforce them in September or October, and then they're going to get another renewal notice starting in November. So that at that point we stop trying to enforce for that current year and focus on the next year. Also, when we have the model with only one person, it can result in a delayed response in communication with the pet owners. Pet owners are typically available after 4:30, and when the current model has it Monday through Friday, 8 to 4:30, that limits the amount of time they can communicate and schedule those appointments. Also, like Nate said, the number of pet license, there was a goal in 2013 to increase that amount of compliance of pet owners in the city, and that has not substantially grown since we implemented the program in 2013. So here on the left is a graph of the number of pets licensed each year in the city of Wausau from 2016, which is when we started with our Evolve system, to 2024. In 2014, the pet fancier permit was created, which was an annual license. And then in 2017, the chicken keeping permit was issued, which again is an annual license. And then in 2018 was the beekeeping permit, which is just a one-time application. So we only need to do an inspection once for that property, and they also don't have to reapply. But you can see here that from 2016 to 2024, there's not really been a substantial increase in the amount of pets that are licensed. It has either slightly decreased or only increased by about, I think, 20 is the max. You can see that there was an increase in 2021 when there was an increased proactive enforcement, as well as our steep late fees. Cody, if you want to go to the next slide. You can see this is our pet license revenue, also during that same time period. And in 2021, we brought in I think it was $691 in the late fees. And then we realized that due to state law, we can only charge $5 as a late fee instead of, I believe it was the cost of a license times 1.5% or something. So it was a pretty steep late fee. And then we discontinued that, I believe, in 2021. And so you can see that the revenue has dropped, and you can see the cost of all of our animal licenses on the right-hand side. And part of that might be the revenue decrease because more people are getting their pet spayed and microchipped, which costs a lot less than if you have neither of those for your pet. But annually, our revenue can fluctuate from about $84,000 to $120,000. And then here, this is kind of what you were getting at, Lisa. The number of, or on the top, that top line, it's actually in red, is City of Wausau's population, and then that bottom line in green is the total amount of pets licensed each year. So that includes, dogs, cats, pet fancier, bees, and not pet fancier, dogs, cats, dangerous dog, and chicken and bees, all included in that. And you can see that the city of Wausau population has increased roughly 1,000 since the program was implemented, but the total number of pets licensed has not increased even with that. And when I looked at the American Veterinary Medical Association's estimation of animals per household based on our number of households, we should have about 18,000 cats and dogs that live in the city, which means we currently have only a 31% compliance rate in 2024 licensing. So that, you know, a goal and a hope when the program was implemented was that the revenues from pet licensing would help cover the cost of the program, which it has not done in this time.
So aside from licensing, just looking at, also looked at the data as far as what else we do for animal control in the city and what falls in the lane of animal control here and elsewhere, and looking at other agencies across Wisconsin, similar size, and who also have animal control issues. So one lane is criminal cases, right? So there can be an investigation, whether it's humane officer, patrol officer, CSO shows up, and there's evidence of neglect or mistreatment. So you can kind of see, we looked at the last 6 years, again, a little bit limited. 2018 is where we changed law enforcement records management system. So my ability to pull some of this information, that's why I went to that point. So in the last 6 years, 43 total cases across 6 years that we referred to the DA's office as a criminal charge for animal cruelty. You see the breakdown there with where humane officer's primary versus the patrol officer. Not to say that either didn't help on either one of those other calls, but when dispatch enters a call, when you say primary, that's the initial officer that's assigned the call as the lead with that. Over the same 6 years, again, 23 backwards, Everest Metro found we had 11 total cases over the time investigated as animal cruelty, with 4 involved by our employee. The animal complaint, CFS's calls for service, kind of looking at the resource allocation for Wausau PD just in the last couple of years. That's going through CAD data, so that's another piece of software the county has that we go through. So just looking at the last 2 years, just pulling out the animal complaint call for service category, and that's just what dispatch enters as the call type for that. So over those 2 years, you see in 2023, patrol was still taking a good share of those calls, and 2022 as well. And we look at that towards, again, with that schedule, the Monday through Friday, one person, they can't cover that much time. They just don't have that much time in that schedule as it's designed. We have evenings and weekends, obviously, where a lot of animal type of activity is also occurring. But when you break down the criminal cases, it for Wausau anyway, just for Wausau, that breaks down to about 7 criminal cases per year. That's for our entire agency. Oh, look at. Okay, so then just looking back at where services were with Everest Metro over this course of time. So looked at all calls that the humane officer was involved with at Everest Metro in their jurisdiction, again, pulling information out of CAD for the last 4 years. You see there are all different types of CAD calls that are call types that dispatch could have entered. So the general animal complaint, lost and found, is kind of a mixed bag. Sometimes it's a lost and found wallet, but oftentimes it's a lost and found dog. So a stray might fall in that category. A welfare check. Sometimes it's a phone message. Someone from the community is calling, wishing to speak with the humane officer and has a question. It gets entered as a phone message. So over that 4-year period, you see our humane officer was involved as the primary assigned officer for 226 and listed as an assisting on 90 for 316 total involvements over those 4 years. Average of the 80 total involvements per year over that time. Looking at the animal-related ordinance citations in Everest Metro for those 4 years, you see the breakdown there. For context, pre-program, 2012, I was able to dig out Everest Metro's animal control-related citations, anything animal-related. They issued 15 citations on their own prior to this program. Over 4 years, we're averaging about 10 a year over there. Call for service totals over there, just pulling out that animal complaint call for service, looking at how the resources are allocated. You see a year-to-year breakdown. 2021, Everest Metro in total responded to 198 animal calls for service. Their patrol handled 160. So as you go through their patrol handled about 80% or more of those calls for service under the animal complaint category. Just looking at strays, we were able to dive in just on what Wausau PD had for stray animal pickup calls. Mostly cats, as you can imagine. But here's a breakdown of the last 3 years. So looking at, again, because of the schedule and the setup and just in one person, patrol still handles the larger share of picking up those strays and addressing them with the Humane Society. Everest Metro, you see 3 dogs in Everest Metro in 2021. It was around 2021 and around that time that Everest Metro declined us picking up cats anymore, so that's why you don't really see any more there. Just look at animal bites. Here's a breakdown how many calls or how many fall into an animal bite investigation per year. As you see a number of those years there, patrol is still taking, is still primary on 60% of those over a couple of years. Everest Metro is still taking a chunk as their patrol primary as well. So animal bite investigations can be a little more time consuming. I mean, we assimilate it to like a traffic crash in terms of what all entails. Someone responds, we get take the information from both sides. There's some necessary paperwork. We have that all set up. It's automated electronic forms where we can enter in that information, and then it gets distributed to places like the health department. We share information with the Humane Society, and then there can be some follow-up work done in terms of is it a dangerous animal or not, and what the declaration process looks like. So, more recently, we looked at like how can we track this better, and we really look at this like these are ongoing investigations. Although, I mean, in the course of years, you can see we average maybe 1 or 2 a month total. But we just developed a case management system recently to handle that. Lieutenant Kurtzals and myself come from out of the Detective Bureau, and we use software to do case management investigations within that. We're able to easily adapt that into this program for 2024. That is a nice, nifty information sharing platform that Humane Society Director can look at it live. It's a living document. We can enter the information, case status information, photos of the animals, and Humane Society can collaborate and enter information on it as well. So we got that up and running, and it's working well. So the realities, we looked at kind of what the goals were initially. So here's the reality where we are today. We looked at, what is the gain on citations that we do per year from when we started in 2013. Unfortunately, it's small gains in licensing enforcement revenues that don't cover the cost of that position. The contract ceased, which was part of the funding of the position. Caitlin spoke to the growth in licensing compliance, and just the schedule setup. It's about the position and really looking at, we had a plan in place. We really wanted to make this work, but it's just not conducive to achieving those primary goals we looked at, which is licensing, and we identified why that is, how and when you can enforce licensing, and also looking at, just reducing the workload on the patrol team. Again, the schedule isn't really conducive to that. In the last 2 years, a little tough looking at CAD data, but it's approximately half the calls for service in the animal control or the animal complaint category fall into the outside those hours, evenings and weekends. Additional with that, the issue of contracting with another agency. I mean, we went down that road as hey, let's find a way. Again, I wasn't here for it, but looking at the history on it, let's find a way to make this work. We can share that service. We just found that to be really problematic because naturally, service gaps are inevitable. Any time an occurrence or duration of that with any employee is really unpredictable. So signing a contract with another place, another agency, how do we cover that with one person? All right, so we can't send patrol officers off of our sector to go cover something down there in another jurisdiction. And what does that mean when we sign a contract for a flat fee and we don't provide that service? What are we on the hook for? What is the risk to the city in terms of owing that money back? But As you could see, just with the calls for service and citations, naturally, there's going to be divided attention. We're detracting our resources away from the goals here in the city, even just a little bit to another jurisdiction, and you can kind of see it's too much. We're not really making good ground in either place, and we're not really benefiting on either side of the party of that contract. That statutory role, that humane officer authority to provide our services, animal control services in the city, that's not necessary. Looking around the state, our Y-Lake partners, we're still the anomaly. After 10 years, other people have figured it out, and that's what we've realized is struggled to find another city municipality that operates a civilian statutory humane officer. And that would get us into kind of where we're going. Next. So the common municipal police model that we see at other agencies, really focusing the animal control duties, not the criminal activity necessarily, not the deeper investigations, but the day-to-day animal control and licensing and compliance as their primary responsibility through code enforcement officers, non-sworn staff, often titled as community service officers like us. Having multiple part-time staff around, year-round, 15, 20 hours per week, allows for flexible shift coverage, max coverage throughout the course of a day into, in evening and afternoon hours. With that, you'd see out there, this would be not our seasonal CSO staff. So this would be other places are up in the $20-some an hour range. It's just a thought, community service officer 2, it's an elevated position, which would mirror our current base pay of our administrative staff at the PD as well as our parking control. And at the current budget, of the reduced budget of $75,000, we were at about $91,000 for the cost of the position minus Everest Metro contract. So budget neutral with the $75,000 remaining. We could do this with, we would get up to 60 hours, a little bit more per week to spread across multiple staff to do the animal control work, the day-to-day things out in the community, and doing licensing enforcement and working with the clerk's office. So this model works all over Fox Valley, Grand Chute, Neenah, Appleton, Eau Claire, Oshkosh, Fond du Lac. Marshfield has code enforcement officers, Racine. So that's the common, well-utilized model. So this is where the restructure comes into play, where you have a team of people, even though it is part-time. It is achievable, and we can achieve those, the boost in those primary goals when we have animal control focusing on these things, the day-to-day initial first responder role of animal bite response, the follow-up quarantine process, doing the licensing piece with the clerk's office and in the in-person checks, and that's how we stumble upon animals who might need care or welfare or whatever. If we're there, we probably encounter some of those animals that need assistance, or we might. As officers do, that's how we encounter things or stumble upon, nefarious activities. Still doing animal transport for any impound situation. So regardless if it's our officers or community resource unit working on a nuisance property, we still want them to be that assistant to handle the animal piece anyway. But not necessarily get involved in the investigation of the house or the crimes that were committed. That's going to be left to our investigators who do that on a day-to-day basis, and they're going to roll that in with their other duties. See that as first responders, that's where we want them to be, out in mobile in the community. With that flexible schedule, we're capturing a high volume of ordinance-related calls. At least that's what other agencies are doing. In the non-licensing season, I guess, if you want to call it, we have some of the down months. We might be able to schedule more hours in the summer or during licensing season. Maybe it's 70 to 80 hours a week we get a staff time, and December, February might only be a quarter or a half of that. But in downtime, these other agencies are using these community service officers to also, we can explore assisting, like inspections department, not taking over their business, but we still have nuisance properties that we're involved with, they're involved with. We still have dangerous animal declarations. We want to make sure those people are complying, of all people, that we can go put eyes on these declared dangerous animals in their yards, making sure they're complying. But there's other opportunities we see where in any downtime, keeping them mobile out in the community, we can assign them any one of these tasks to assist. And then in the other lanes here, the criminal activity, I think we went over that. We have a law enforcement agency that already does that day to day. unlike countywide humane officer programs. Our law enforcement officers across our officers, our community resource unit, which is much more robust than it was in 2013, who are already into a lot of these types of cases. They're primarily responsible with their skills and abilities in doing search warrants to do that continuing investigation of criminal cases and referring those to the D's office. And I think we touched on this. When we have animal cruelty, there's usually something else going on that we see, and we can handle those cases with our investigative staff in an efficient manner. The bites and dangerous animal declarations, that's where we noticed in talking with city attorney's office that we don't have that many a year, but we really want to make sure those are done well. We want to make sure that there's decisions made on a case-by-case basis, that we have this statute that allows us to declare it, but we're talking about people's animals and their pets and what it means to remove them and take them away or have them move out of the city. So we'd have our administrative supervisors and myself and Lieutenant Kurtzals really follow that case management of our dangerous animal declarations, work with the city attorney's office for the follow-up investigation, and as you see, they're working with the Humane Society to have a constant flowing of information on what the status is of the animal. When the owner's calling the Humane Society, that they can see the status of what that is, and they're in the know as we go along. So here's kind of just the concluding points. I mean, we saw the budget's reduced, it runs out mid-October. Right now, the proposal will be to wind down that humane officer position to end October 26th is when it would approximately run out on that budget. And we have a budget neutral solution that other agencies have proven to work to do what we're looking to do. With the T model of community resource or community service officers at that elevated scale, obviously we would train them and use them as use that program effectively to help train and develop our new officers and be good officer candidates. That's another bonus of this model that other agencies use to develop their people and along that line. So it is, we see that restructuring staff in this way really what does grow our capacity to be able to advance those things that we're talking about in terms of restructuring when people are available to do the work, how many hours a week we can put into doing that work, and really think that opens up our capacity to impact that bulk of call volume as well as our licensing compliance.
Okay, we're to the question part. I guess I have just a couple of things, and then we'll open it up and I'm sure the committee has questions as well. I think that when we look at the statistical data, which I find eye-opening as far as how many of the complaints are still being handled by patrol. The whole goal of the program was to relieve the pressure on patrol. And so the fact that they are involved still so much of the time, especially with Everest Metro, it's no wonder that contract didn't continue. Our goal when we started out was to not only ramp up that effort, but then to you were right in our effort to regionalize. We were actually looking at regional services, taking on one partner, seeing how that partnership worked. If it worked and it worked well, even scaling up that program to even a broader reach, but that really never did take flight. I think that if the investigation piece, which is one of the things we always were concerned about as far as cruelty complaints, that type of stuff, if that could be handled through the community resource operation or even through the detective bureau, depending on how intensive the investigation was. That was the one piece that gave me pause. I know with the community resource or neighborhood resource effort, there's an inspection component of that, where those two departments have always worked hand in hand to address those nuisance property situations, sometimes which involve animals. And your comments are well received with the dangerous dog follow-up. We have those hearings in here when necessary. The most recent one that we heard, we had to overturn the designation because we did not feel that we had accurate investigation on that. Otherwise, it probably would have upheld, but we just did not have enough to feel like we were on good legal footing to maintain that designation. So I did in that moment even have concerns about the depth of the investigation that was done to be able to, perform properly in a hearing here and find out really what happened and have us have enough information to make an educated decision on that designation. So, with the proposal, Obviously, if funding runs out at the end of October, or November through January being fairly slow time for this based on your calendar, I guess, is your plan or your request that the committees and the council consider this type of program change, like for the start of next year for the 25 budget?
Yes.
Would you have a gap for a couple months until we can get this talked about?
Yeah, that's the intent, is that we would, the funding runs out at that time, and that proposal's for 2025 to start new that year.
Sure. Because I think, committee-wise, obviously, this is going to require some action in the HR committee. So stuff has to be restructured. So it would require activity in the HR committee. HR chairman is here. So, I think the only action this committee would take at this point, if we're interested in such a plan, would be to make a recommendation to the HR committee that they begin that work. And then when that work is ready, it would go to council. If we're using the same budget dollars, it wouldn't need finance. And it would be inserted into the 25 budget in the draft, right on the front end for the same dollars. So I guess committee members, do you have any questions about the presentation? But I definitely can see the gaps and we know that there's been this gap in licensing compliance, and that, I think based on the intensity, and Caitlin is not the first clerk who I've had this discussion with about the backlog, because the time is just so condensed. From the time you are able to send the late notice to the time you're about out of time for that enforcement, you just physically, one person cannot get to, you'd have to do it full-time and you still couldn't. And the restrictive nature of the day hours is troubling, because we know often that, at least when we formed the program, a lot of the complaint calls that were being answered even then happen at night and on the weekend, whether it's, barking dogs or it's all kinds of issues that happen in neighborhoods. They don't all happen during the business day, and that's when nuisance and noise come to play often is at night. I mean, that's at least the people that have complained to me in my own neighborhood about things happening. It's usually not at noon. So,
And in 2013, when your committees looked at that, it was a goal to have extended hours of humane officer enforcement with up to like 3 positions, but it was just not cost effective to have that many
Right.
people employed.
I think we were hoping that the scale up would allow for the flexibility, and then we just really got to a point where, we were stagnant because we weren't scaling up, but we weren't getting better with what we were doing either. So, I think an efficient use of the funding would be any way that we can provide the services that the community expects us to provide. If we have a gap in service and we still have that same operational pressure on patrol, I think that really is, we're not serving the public properly. I feel like their expectation is that when they call in with a problem like this, that, they're going to have it handled in a manner that they've expected, because this program exists specifically for that. And so, then if there's a delay in the delivery of that service, even if, say patrol is overburdened with high call volume for other things, and they can't get there right away, there's, I think, the expectation in the public that the service should be efficient and be available. So, I certainly can see the need for some change. I guess, Becky?
I guess I just want to piggyback off of that, since I've been included in this since the beginning. We raised licensing fees for this service. That is how it was, proposed to the residents, is that, and many of the residents that license in their animals want this service, not because they don't take care of their dogs, but they are animal lovers, and they want this service to be met at their expectations. So with the higher licensing fees and things like that, I do believe we have to give the service we had offered.
I agree. Other comments?
And I'll just add that we cannot issue an animal license unless we see that rabies certificate. And so the reason why we care so much about the compliance is not to, cover that revenue, but to really ensure that people are taking care of their animals. So that way, if their dog does get away and bite someone, that it is, does have its rabies vaccination, or if it just, gets lost and it's microchipped, we can help find it easier. Like, that's why the scale and licensing fees is set up that way to help encourage people to do both of those.
It was, and the same thing with the workshop, to get them to people at a reduced cost if they can't afford them the other way. So, I think that the program has had some achievements. I mean, obviously, some of the investigations have yielded some positive results for situations that were reprehensible and needed handling, but, I think this situation with the shared program ending really was kind of a check for us, at least in the Finance Committee, to say, are we providing the service up to the standard that people expect us to? And, if that answer is no, then we have to do something different. I feel like then we have to, set about our HR process and, maybe find a way to deliver that service more efficiently and more broadly. So I guess anything else from committee members? I think there is, the clerk had alerted me that there may be people that wanted to make public comment. Anybody that's here, citizens that want to make public comment? Okay, you can come up and make comment. Try to confine your comment to 3 minutes or less, please.
My name is Judy Lombard. I live at 149988 Skylark Lane in Rim Mountain, but I have an interest in the Humane Officer Program simply because I managed the Humane Society from 2000 to 2008. And I listened with interest to the presentation. I will always be a firm believer in having, in a community this size especially, having a trained humane officer. Maybe supplement that officer, if you can, with people to do, sort of the mundane items. But I do believe in a strong humane officer program. When I was at the shelter, one of my goals for this community was to build an adequate facility that would service this community and this county, and eventually to see someone step forward, as Wausau did, and be progressive enough to see the value in a humane officer who is trained by the state, licensed to do all sorts of functions, not just collect licensing fees and play dog catcher. And I understand the finance end of it as much as I heard here, but I still think you need that core, that training. And that's exactly why I believe the state of Wisconsin, in its wisdom, created the ability for a humane officer to function according to the ordinances that they created. They saw the value in that too. So I'm hoping that the city will find a way to retain a true humane officer and supplement that. I understand officer involvement is not efficient. I understand that. When I was at the shelter, especially on Kent Street, I heard many complaints from officers who had a cat pee in their car and, weren't trained, weren't interested. Some of them didn't like cats, some of them were afraid of dogs, and yet here they are doing those processes. And I can't believe financially that it's efficient to send an officer out when you could have someone supplementing your humane officer and doing those things at a lesser fee. I'm not the finance person. But I would hate to see the city, as progressive as it is, to go backwards and abandon that program altogether and just to put part-timers in there. Being a humane officer is more than just licensing fees, even though I understand the financial responsibility for that. It's education and enforcement and accountability, but there's so much to it. But ultimately, it should all end up in being a prevention issue. That's the goal of the humane officer, is to prevent a lot of issues. Maybe your citation level has gone down simply because that program is working. I mean, I don't know how you prove a negative, but it's possible. I just hope, let me put it that way, that the city can find a way to supplement this program but retain a trained humane officer. I think there's great value in that. And other communities do too. Communities this size have figured it out, and they have humane officers who are trained by the state. I appreciate your time, and I hope you can find a way to retain that program.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Next.
Ashley Bishop, current humane officer, address 1203 North 5th Street. Couple Couple of things that I want to bring statistically. Now, keep in mind, please, that I was notified of the termination of my position as of about 10 o'clock this morning. So all of the data I have has been within the last 7 hours. I've spoken with Racine and Marshfield, which were both noted as having CSOs. They do have CSOs doing their animal control things. However, those CSOs are certified humane officers, just as I am. Racine has a population of 80,000 people within their community. They currently have 4 CSOs and are in the process of hiring 3 more. That means if we took that into rationale for the city of Wausau, which is 40,000, we should have an average of 4 humane officers. Similar to that, Marshfield also works through their police department. Their CSOs, they do a lot more. They have their humane officer certification. They also do parking enforcement and inspections type things that we have employees already doing. 50% of their calls are for animal control and animal welfare. They have a population of 20,000 with 2 humane officers. So where the lacking part is within the community is the fact that we don't have enough people to be doing the job. I am one person. I cannot be here 24/7. Now, with respect to the patrol taking primary calls, that may be true. However, 95% of the time, patrol takes the call and I get an email. I do the follow-up. I finish the case after they do the initial report. Patrol takes somebody into jail. They have an animal in their vehicle. They're not from around here, so guess what? That animal is going to the Humane Society held for cause. I make a point of making sure that I am actively trying to get custody of that animal or finding somebody to take that animal so that the city is not being charged the held for cause fees. Sometimes I have to wait until I get a report or, the Humane Society contacts me to say that there's held for cause, because if the officer doesn't notify me, I can't work on it, but also nobody else does the follow-up on that. So in respect to that and the cost, I would like you to consider how much I have potentially saved this community by making sure that we are going through and I am checking to make sure that immediately and as soon as I can, those animals are released from the custody of the Humane Society. Anybody from our legal team could actually attest to that, because I'm constantly calling and asking, okay, how long do we have to hold for? What can we do? Do we need to get a summons and complaint? How do we go about that? So there has been a significant amount of money that has been saved for that. As far as the Everest Metro taking most of the primary calls, I wasn't notified. For me to go on calls, I have to be told by dispatch or, be able to see it on the screen. I wasn't. I can't go to something if I don't know about it. And that's something I very frequently tell the public. So it's really hard to do that. We have a great police department. Our officers are dedicated to their work. I think that I work with a great group of people. I say this with all due respect. They don't know or understand the animal laws the way that somebody can be trained to do that, because they don't have that specific training. I don't want them to have that specific training because they have more important things to deal with the people. Animals are important because there is a link between animal abuse and neglect and domestic violence. Animals are important to people's mental health and well-being. We as a community need to be taking care of the animals within our communities, but we cannot be expecting our law enforcement officers who have to be taking care of the people to also be taking care of something that they are unfamiliar with, maybe don't want to deal with. Madam Chair, do you remember the original case that brought the prospect of a humane officer to the forefront?
This is public comment. I'm not certain that asking
Okay, okay.
I can, though. I think it was the cruelty case that spawned Mary's Law.
It was.
Yep.
It was. That was an intense case. I won't go into detail here. But feel free to look up Mary's Law, and you will see in the news and the media why it was so intense and the toll that it took and the things that were learned because the officers weren't aware of what they should be doing. And that's to no fault of their own. That is why I am here. This is why we as a community, as a United States, need to have people dedicated to animal law enforcement.
Okay, thank you for those comments. And under the model, yeah, I know, though, just a question, I guess, about our presentation. We had talked about the CSO staff that you would assign for this type of assignment would be specifically trained or trained differently than the average CSO, correct? It sounded like you were going to bring them in at a different pay rate, and then you were going to provide some of that specific job training, correct?
You're
Yeah,
looking at me,
yes.
but Nate's standing there, so.
Okay, either of you.
Yeah, that's the idea, that these other agencies that do that, they do provide that training. There's a 40-hour course through the state of Wisconsin that we can send law enforcement officers as well. So like sworn staff go to that. We actually have one who is certified under that program. It's a 40-hour course offered by the state.
Sure.
So, yeah, CSOs, obviously, they would be more trained to do the job that they're currently doing. These wouldn't be our typical seasonal CSOs at 12 to 13 bucks an hour is kind of where we're at right now. Other agencies definitely with the higher pay rate and the trained skill to focus on this, yeah, we're in that $20 an hour and on up range to get people that are looking into law enforcement, maybe have some experience in it, but are looking to get into being a police officer
Sure.
that way.
I guess my number one concern really in terms of this type of operation, I mean, we created this program specifically to provide a service that the public expects. We use their fees to do it with. We committed to them that we would use their fees to do it. But we specifically wanted to not only increase the frequency and the quality of the response, but relieve the pressure on patrol. And that I keep coming back to the fact that if we still have that level of pressure on our patrol officers to fill that gap between the restrictive time frame, we are not getting where we need to be in utilizing that funding. So, I think that, there will have to be some, I think, some research and discussion had in the HR committee about, how to restructure this as far as what would need to happen, both between job descriptions and payroll allotment. But I guess I'm interested in seeing what that discussion in HR would yield. I guess if HR Chair, are you willing to take that up in your committee? She's nodding, she would be. Lou?
Madam Chair, thank you. In listening to the presentation and in listening to what the humane officer, I'm not so sure that this is a step forward. And I think this thoroughly needs to be looked at. I think that, might be a good idea to have CSOs, but it might also be a good idea just to retain what we have, which is a seasoned veteran and knows the ins and outs, just like, it would be like
Right.
Erasing Tracy's position
Right.
and putting some CSOs in to try to get people into rentals and stuff. I don't see where that would be a step forward.
Well, and I feel like that's what the discussion in HR would bear out, as far as to compare the two services. I mean, either way, there would have to be a massive restructuring of scheduling hours. I mean, the day shift Monday through Friday just does not make it. I mean, we are not providing the service to the community at a time when they need it, and they're not getting what they expect. I mean, we sold this to them as, I mean, we bought a vehicle for this, and it's a lot different than it was in 2012 before we launched the program, where the patrol officers were doing all or most of it. They were transporting those animals in patrol cars. I mean, we have a specialized vehicle for this now. It's not like they're throwing them in the back of a squad car and, transporting them anymore to where they have these animal accidents and stuff in the car. That's not happening anymore. They have a van for this,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah, may I address your comment? Yeah, in terms of, you talk about having that knowledge base about the law and having someone trained to do that. I mean, in the models that are successful, like we would, one of the drawbacks about having one person is the knowledge base starts to go away, right? All the institutional knowledge ends up being with one person because officers, well, that's not my job, and we kind of walk away from it. Places that are successful with the model that we proposed, supervisors, there's a team involvement. So it's not just on the community service officers. There are supervisors that have now active involvement in where law enforcement officers using discretion and applying law. So it's still law enforcement just within the animal code. So absolutely, we'd be committed and are in building that institutional knowledge across our supervisors, persons in my position, so that we can make decisions on application of the law and make sure that we give those people the guidance. So please don't believe that it's all going to be put on their shoulders. A good team approach includes a good supervisory approach in which that knowledge base is spread across, and we can develop people. We can develop sworn officers with that training, and we have officers that are interested as a career development to have other agencies have sworn police officers, even though they're not called a humane officer, get that humane officer training to be that lead go-to person during the day for that kind of decision. And then they get to develop their careers with that knowledge base into a supervisory position to be able to make those decisions. So I just wanted to give that context that it's not all on their shoulders. That use of the law and knowledge base of the law really needs to be spread across multiple people in our organization.
okay. Well, and it helps, I think, to have people who are duly trained that can pinch hit for one another. I think so often if somebody, I mean, even if you're on vacation, that means nothing's happening during that time. So, or what if you're injured? And then when that happens, at least if you have this multi-person model, someone else is performing that responsibility in lieu of, it really isn't all on the back of one person. I'd be interested in having some discussion, at least having HR discuss it and see what that framework would look like. I guess, what do you guys think, committee? I mean, our recommendation would be we'd make a recommendation to the HR committee to look into this proposal and make a recommendation as to a staffing plan. And they would take that to council. So, I mean, we'd all see it again. And we don't decide what positions exist here or not. I mean, it's not, that's an HR function. I mean, we're looking at it from the policing side. And from the presentation, it looks like we're falling down a little bit on the service to the community if we can't provide it as robustly as we've always wanted to. I mean, does someone want to make a motion to direct the HR or make a recommendation to the HR committee to take up this matter at a future meeting? Because that's really all we would do here.
I'll make that motion to
Okay.
bring it to HR. HR director's been here the entire time.
That's helpful?
Yeah, so he's up to date on it.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion from McElhaney to begin discussion in HR to review this model and then make a recommendation to the Common Council for staffing of the humane or animal control program. Is there a second for her motion? Second by Watson. Further discussion?
Do you want?
Would you want to weigh in, Tegan, first before we vote? That's fine.
So I just want you all to be aware that we've been in discussions with the HR director. I've done research on the legal side to make sure that what we're proposing is legal, and I have no issues with this proposal.
Okay.
And HR was on board with it as well.
Okay, that will actually inform their discussion as well, because they can take a look at the numbers that we got here tonight, and they'll know what the budget looks like from last year and for next year, because the money part also matters to them. So with a motion and a second on the floor, then to refer this matter to HR to study the appropriate staffing model for animal control and make a recommendation to the Common Council at a future meeting. Members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Okay, so we'll let the record show we have one opposed. So that motion passes 4-1, and then HR will take it up on their agenda as they are able to. So thank you, everyone, for your presentations. Yeah, sure, go ahead.
My nay vote was on basis is because, as much as I'd like to maybe see this look forward, I would like to also see how our humane officer would fit into this program,
Okay,
so she's not out of a job.
sure. And that's part of their study, so, all right.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. So with it, we won't take additional public comment on this because the committee has voted. So we'll let public comment for that matter stand closed. Item number 5 is the tavern activities report for the month of April, which you have in your packets. Anything on the report that you have questions for Chief Barnes about? Or anything notable on the report, Chief, that you wanted to chat with us about?
No, it was a rather uneventful month, but since we're on YouTube and maybe there's people watching, you'll notice in that report that it puts the community on notice that we'll be doing investigations in the next couple months to make sure we have compliance. So please make sure everyone in your establishment is 21 years old, because we're going to come check.
Okay, yeah.
Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
When I noticed in the report, I noticed also the 12, I think, or 13 attempts to see that the Domino Bar was open. And it's not going to be open, as I said in the previous meetings. I really think that these people are getting one over on the city, and I think that they need to be
Brought in.
yeah.
That's something that we certainly can do. I think at our last meeting, we'd asked the chief to reach out to the owner. Were you able to make contact with the owner?
Yes, I shared with the owner our concerns. I actually invited him to come to one of these meetings. I suggested either this month or next month. What I learned in that meeting from him was that their current business practice is to be open only for private events and utilizing their liquor license for that. I did share with him, it was a very nice conversation. My understanding is the place is currently on the market, and they're seeking a buyer of the Domino, and that they wanted to be compliant and asked, how many days do we need to be open? I looked at the ordinance, which says 50% of the days in a calendar year, I think is how the ordinance reads, and I'm like, we're pretty deep into the year without having been open, so I don't know that that's attainable for them.
Right.
I strongly encourage the owners to come in here and just have a conversation about what their plans are with this committee, so that everybody's on the same page. We haven't found it open, and that's because they haven't been open to the public.
Well, and I think to make it, I guess, to make sure that we're treating everyone fairly, I think in this situation with every other establishment that's been in this predicament, where they've not been open and need to get open and stay open to keep the license, we have that conversation with them in this setting. I think it would be appropriate to invite the owner, license holder, to the next meeting in June. So send them the standard
formal
letter,
letter of
yep,
concern.
and ask them to come. And, I think they have to have a plan for how to operate. They can't sit on the license hoping the right buyer comes along. They need to get open and stay open and use it until they find someone. And, if not, obviously, we have a process by which we would take that back, because there's always businesses that want to open, that want those licenses, and they are a limited commodity. Did Domino apply for July 1 renewal?
They did not yet.
They have not.
And the deadline was last Wednesday.
Okay, so they may not be applying for renewal. So if that's the case, the license may come available July 1st anyway, if they've not applied.
And then
So-
I also did speak with one of the owners on the phone too, and encouraged her to attend this meeting as well. And she did also make that, she did also state that they were intending to sell.
Okay, okay. So
Can I add one
Sure,
comment,
go ahead.
Madam Chair? I
Yep.
think that by saying that they're going to be open for only special events or parties, private parties or whatever, I think it's a cop-out, and I think it's not what our licenses are for.
Right. It isn't fair to the others who we've brought in and asked them to get open and stay open, and they have. I mean, we've had places that, we've had establishments where the owner was ill, and they found a way to get open for the requisite number of hours and at least utilize the license in the interim while the business was in flux. And so, I mean, we expect if they have a license that, is given to them, that they'll use it effectively and not just sit on it and hold it. So the ordinance that they would be in violation of is the license abandonment ordinance, and so we'll send out that letter, have them come for June's meeting. Anything else on the report that anybody had questions on? If not, we'll place that report on file. And so then item number 6 is the community outreach update. So we'll bring up Tracy. Welcome back.
Thank you. Okay, so I think all of you saw my report in your packet. The month of April shows about 217 unhoused individual, or 84% of those sheltered. Salvation Army, as we talked about at the last meeting, has changed their housing or sheltering model to families only. And I did make contact with Colleen prior to the end of April, and they did have 7 single males in shelter, and were able to get 6 of the 7 placed in housing or some other residence prior to that program ending. So I thought that was a really great accomplishment from the Salvation Army and staff. Catholic Charities remains, at capacity for the month of April, at or above capacity 20 of those days. They did have a higher turnaway rate than the month prior to with 131. And Becky, I did start asking for some specific numbers related to employment. And for the month of April, about 12 individuals who were in shelter at any given time were employed. And so Janet is going to continue to give me those updates as they happen. In terms of my outreach efforts last month, I did get 2 individuals housed and did connect with 5 additional individuals. Something else that kind of I wanted to bring to the attention of this committee is the collaboration that I had with the Housing Authority. So we had our Section 8 application open for about 2.5 weeks. And during that time, the Housing Authority had placed my name and information on their application so that anyone who checked the box as unhoused, they also did a follow-up question asking if it would be okay if the Housing Authority reached out to me once their name was pulled so that I could help establish connecting the 2 together. That right now has 100% success rate. So I want to report that here because I think that's huge. Last year, they didn't have a great success rate with the unhoused because they weren't able to find them. The physical mailing address that they placed on their application changed from the time they applied to the time they actually got pulled. So right now I'm working diligently with the Housing Authority. I got the jail staff involved this last week for 2 individuals that were on that list and made the connection between the jail and the Housing Authority to get those 2 individuals the equal opportunity to have their vouchers presented to them as well. So I know, Becky, you had mentioned this too, that you want to know about ongoing collaborations, and I want to say that this has been a really great one. The other thing is I'm working really closely with the DA's office and through their deflection program, and we're having meetings to establish, clients in common and what might be the best route for them to go for treatment. So really some great things happening. I did have one success story from the 2 that I housed that I wanted to share. Both of them obviously were successful, but I wanted to share the one because this was also a collaboration with social services. And, I have that person actually reaching out to me, asking me how I'm doing versus the other way around. So I think that's pretty cool. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to take those now. Yes.
Go ahead.
I have a question, yes. Just out of curiosity, whatever happened to that family of 5 that showed up by the police station last month and said, "We're here to see Tracy"?
Yeah, well-
Whatever happened with that?
So, nothing. They never came back. There was one other, I think, police contact with that group, and they were going to come and see me the following week, and they never came. So I'm guessing they self-resolved some way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, your success story is inspiring, and, it's just inspiring community-wide to see the success that you're having. I mean, even if it's case by case and it's 1 or 2 here and there, I mean, the total number of people that you've been able to help since you came on board with the city is great. The council last week did vote to host a committee of the whole to talk about the state of homelessness in general. And at its council retreat last Thursday, one of the three issues that the council members picked that they want to prioritize for the next 2 years was homelessness, along with affordable housing, which kind of walks hand in hand, and growth and development. So the mayor and I are looking at scheduling that meeting. We had talked about maybe splitting that committee of the whole into 2 meetings instead of one long 5-hour meeting with the volume of data that's been asked for. The first section of which would be an analysis and some presentations on the current state of things and the work that's in progress, so we can get our arms around what we're doing right now. And the second half of which is kind of trying to figure out some next step and some action steps and figure out what expanded collaboration would look like, both with other units of government and with agencies. So I think splitting that work elephant into 2 parts will be more productive, but I see that at least in that first one, that you and your work will be a key part of that focus, along with your collaborations and bridges that you've been building out in the community. So anybody have questions at all for Tracy on her work at all? So I'll let her have that I'll let you have that
I don't know if I'm
discussion
putting it on
offline because we
record, I
can't
was
hear
gonna
her on
say.
the microphone.
Yeah.
Well, so the question was, how many more people would Tracy need to achieve her goals? And
Well, I mean, the answer is I don't know. And the reason I don't know is because every single individual that I work with has a very unique story, has a very unique situation, has a very unique plan to get them successfully to the next place they're trying to get to. So, you know, I can take, for example, the woman that you may have all seen on Facebook, that the CPC put out there that I got housed last week. And I would say I started working with her a couple months ago, and I would say her alone, I was with her last week alone for more than 12 hours. That's one person and more than one full day of work. So I think it's really hard for me to determine how much help I need. I think that everybody getting educated on the subject matter and, you know, learning themselves what the resources in our community are, word of mouth is what's going to help me the most, you know.
Right. I think
is-
I think that, and just an awareness of you and your work. You know, I think as that builds and people recognize that, you know, you're there as a resource and, you know, as an access point to the hand up that we call it. A lot of times we want to have people who are in that situation, you know, grab a hold of your hand and then get themselves to a better place with the connections that you have to help them. So,
And I do want to just make one more comment about the new officers that are on the downtown project. We've had some fantastic collaboration. The
Good.
2 officers and myself, we actually had an incident today where the officer called me direct. I was sitting at my desk working, and he asked if I could come down. I scooted down there, and I made a connection with somebody that I'd never met before. So their position is absolutely doing what it is intended to do.
That
And that
is
is to
great work.
connect individuals to myself.
very excited about that. Chief?
So I just wanted to add that it's our intention to have those officers or a representative of them and the work that they're doing be presented to this committee on a monthly basis, probably tied in with Tracy's report. I did ask them how things are going today. They've been in a week, and I said, have you solved all the issues yet? And they said, not yet, Matt. So that's my report to you.
And I do think that at some point, and I guess this will maybe shake itself out too with our committee of the whole and with our prioritization within the council committees. I do think that also as part of the reporting on this particular subject, there would be value for us to, at least periodically, hear from Catholic Charities as far as what the status is of their activity in operating the night shelter and the day center. The day center being the newest one, but both of them actually, as far as what their intake numbers look like, what those connections look like, because I think you're meeting people through that service as well. You know, and they also every month, for whatever reason, they do have some turnaway numbers. They have some capacity situations sometimes. So I think it's important for us to have at least a periodic update from them as far as how things are going as they get rolling. So,
So far, so good. They made
Okay.
a lot of connections, and they feel like progress is possible.
that's good. And that's what we want to see, because I know that it was slow going there for a while as they were trying to staff up and, you know, get things rolled out and switch their space from night to day. So that's helpful. Any additional questions on community outreach? If not, we'll place that report on file then, and we are We'll obviously take this up again this month. We're looking at trying to set that committee of the whole that the council asked for towards the end of June, once we have some data to report, both for the work of our 2 officers, and we also have to gather some data from agencies that provide the services. So once we have that in hand, we'll be looking to schedule that towards the end of June. So
If I can just make
Sure.
one comment.
state your name and address for the record, though, so we have you in the minutes.
Diane Polis, 402 East Cassidy Drive, Wausau. I've been waiting for years for somebody to do a little bit more in that with our homeless population. I take it personally in my family itself, and I'm raising 4 children of a homeless person that keeps continuing to fall through the cracks.
Sure.
Tracy has met her, and every other service in our town has met her or has spoken with her, but they cannot make that connection due to many, many issues. And Tracy needs more. We need somebody to find those unique people. My daughter's not the only one. There's many, many more that have unique stories. There's nobody out there.
Yep.
There's been nobody from the beginning, and we're into 4 or 5 years of this already.
Sure.
You need to do something. Our town, you walk around our town and see all of those people that are just wandering, wandering. They probably all have children, family. They can't figure out which foot to put in front of the other to try to figure out how to make their world work.
Sure.
Got to do something.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And that resonates with us as a committee. This is something that we've tried to prioritize, and, we've made some big strides in the last couple years. I mean, even the fact that we have Tracy now is a monumental step forward. I mean, for years, we were at the table, but completely unfunded. And so thank you to the federal government for some unprecedented ARPA dollars that we were able to invest in trying to move the needle on some of this stuff. So we'll continue every month to get these updates. Absent additional questions or comment, that's our last item, so I'd take a motion to adjourn. Motion from Larson, is there a second? Second by Lukens. Further discussion? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No one's ever opposed to adjournment. We'll stand adjourned then. Thank you, everyone.